in many organizations, even modern organizations that claim to be doing agile and lean, you'll still see product managers who spend a lot of their time doing an activity called backlog grooming. And what this is taking requirements, building features, keeping those features in a prioritized list. As new features arrive, reprioritizing the list, and then handing those features out to teams or individual developers as work becomes available. And fundamentally, I think this is a bad way to manage work. I'm not alone here. Lots of people think this is a bad idea. It's still very prevalent, so you will see it, but it's not the best way to manage work for a few reasons. First of all, those features and requirements quickly become stale. The situation which made those features seem like the right thing to do changes, the product changes, customers change their minds, the trade-offs that you face and the technologies that are available change as well. So what might have seemed the best way to achieve an outcome at a particular time is very unlikely to be the best way to achieve that same outcome a few months later. And ultimately, it's not the features that matter. As we've said many times in this class, it's about outcomes, not features. So if we spend a lot of time focusing on a backlog of features, that tends to obscure the outcomes that we care about. So it's very easy to lose sight of the outcomes and be focusing instead on the features and how we're doing delivering the features. That's not the right conversation to be having. How we deliver outcomes is also a team decision. It's not something that should be decided by the product manager operating on their own or with analysts. It's the team's job to work out how to actually build the things that will achieve the outcomes, because they're the people with the experience and the best knowledge on actually how to do the work. So we want those outcomes to be turned into work by the team in a just-in-time way. As capacity becomes available to work on a particular outcome, the team should get together and work out what they're going to do based on the most recent information, what's happening right now, the situation at hand. That is the freshest information we have, rather than relying on decisions that were made potentially months ago by different people operating in a different situation. So fundamentally, the idea that product managers should be spending a lot of time on backlog grooming is wrong. It's a wasteful way to manage your work. It's a distraction from the thing that really matters, which is the outcomes we care about. So I'm going to discuss an alternative framework for thinking about managing work in the context of medium-term planning that is used at Google and Intel and many other places, called OKRs. OKRs stands for Objectives and Key Results. And the idea is you specify a list of objectives as part of your planning process. And those objectives are clear statements of goals that you want to achieve, or your intent for the work that you want to do over the next few months. So you start by stating the objectives you want to achieve, which are typically organization level outcomes or customer outcomes. They can be related to the features you want to build. They can also be related to those architectural changes that I discussed as another key piece of work that you'll want to do. Any of these major pieces of work that you want to do can be stated as objectives. And if you have a bunch of features, a great thing to do to get from features to objectives is to ask why. There's a technique that was developed in Lean called the 5 whys, and the 5 is a bit misleading. You don't need to ask why exactly 5 times, but when presented with a feature, you can ask, well, why are we building this feature? And someone should be able to say, well, we're doing it because of this. And you should be able to say, well, why are we doing this? And if you ask why enough times, you will ultimately come to an objective that you care about, which is customer focused or organization focused. And so you really want to take that effort of actually working out what the objectives are for the work you're doing, and then just state the objectives, because how you achieve the work isn't the most important thing. And it's something that, as I've said, will change over time based on context and is best decided by the team. So what we want to be thinking about in release planning and medium range planning is the objectives. Once you have objectives, you then want to state key results for each objective, which is one or more clear, measurable outcomes, which when taken together mean that the objective will be achieved. So the key results are measurable outcomes. They are taken together a set of necessary and sufficient conditions for achieving the objective. They're milestones, if you like, that are measurable criteria. Well, we need to get this done, this done, this done. When we get these 3 things done, that will mean we've achieved the objective. And again, these should not be features. They should be measurable outcomes that we care about, that taken together will indicate that the objective has been achieved. When you are building your list of OKRs, the first thing you need to do is work out who the key stakeholders are in those OKRs. So if you're a product manager, that will typically be your development teams, operations teams, SREs, your customers. You could have a customer board, for example, of key customers. All the people involved in the value stream of getting your work done should be involved in coming up with that list of OKRs. And that should be a grassroots exercise. You should ask everyone in the team to come up with OKRs and then use design thinking activities to come up with that list of OKRs in a generative way. And so once we've gathered those OKRs from our key stakeholders, what we then do is we prioritize them. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can either rank order them, so going from 1 to n, or you can group them, have some be priority 0, the highest priority, some of them be priority 1, some of them be priority 2, and so forth. But you need some way of prioritizing which ones are critical to get done, which ones are less critical, or so forth. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for working in this way. First of all, it's important to distinguish between commitments and aspirational OKRs. So commitments are things that you definitely have to get done. Those will typically be very key product outcomes and key architectural outcomes. Then there'll be some aspirational things where you really want to do it, but it's quite unclear how you'll achieve it, and there's a lot of uncertainty. For those aspirational objectives, you should aim for a 70% success rate. You're never going to be able to fully achieve those all of the time, but you want to be able to hit some of those aspirational OKRs. So typically there'll be a mix of things that we absolutely have to do and some things that are aspirational. And you want to make sure that you have some of those in there, but not everything is aspirational unless you're building a completely new product from scratch. You're in Horizon 3, you're dealing with high levels of uncertainty, then you might have more of the aspirational outcomes, and that's okay. So I talked about this earlier, but if you have a list of features and tasks, you can get to OKRs by using the 5 whys technique. Why are we doing this? Why is that important? What does that achieve? Why are we doing that? And you'll get back to ultimately objectives that matter to customers and the organization. One of the points of having a list of OKRs is so that you can reject low value work. So you will have people come to your team and say, we really need to do X. And your response should be, well, which of our OKRs does that contribute towards? And if they say, well, none of them, then you should be able to say, well, that doesn't sound like it's high priority work. The ability to do that rests on having done a good job involving all the key stakeholders from the beginning. Because what can happen if you don't do that is a new stakeholder who has potentially a lot of organizational power but wasn't involved in the OKR setting agreement can come in halfway through your release and say, this has to be done now. And if they have a lot of organizational power, you might have to reorganize your OKRs mid-release, which is a very disruptive thing to do and can often cause uncertainty and damage the psychological safety of your team. So you really want to avoid that. And the best way to avoid that is to identify all the key stakeholders and involve them in the OKR process from the beginning. That can sometimes be very difficult to do. Often the hardest thing in any of these exercises is actually getting all the key stakeholders together in a room at one time. But that's crucially important. And this goes back to what we were talking about in Unit 2, the importance of doing discovery. Medium-term release planning, OKR setting is a discovery activity. It's discovering what we're going to do in the next 3 months. And it's important to involve the key stakeholders in that activity and maybe set a day or two aside to do that in a synchronous way. And then once you've got your list of OKRs, make sure you update the status of those OKRs regularly, that you're tracking progress of the key results, potentially on a bi-weekly basis, but certainly so that you have a clear idea if those OKRs are going to be at risk, and so that you're able to communicate effectively if that's the case, especially if those are high priority OKRs, so that you don't get to the end of your release and discover that you haven't met any of your key objectives. That's something you want to get a grip on pretty early on and make sure you're tracking. So I'm going to give you a real example of some OKRs, and these are not perfect OKRs, and that's okay, because in real life everyone does it a bit differently, but hopefully you can see how this is very closely related to what I was talking about. This is a program level set of OKRs for a team of 400 engineers working on firmware for printers. This is from the HP LaserJet firmware team who were working on a rebuild of their firmware platform. And this is the OKRs from mini milestone 30 or month 30. So they set OKRs every month, which is kind of the short end, but totally reasonable thing to do, especially for a project where it's new and there's lots of uncertainty. Where that's true, you want to keep the OKR horizon pretty short, because it's very likely that the OKRs that you set will not be the right one, and you'll want to reset them on a regular schedule as you discover new things as you're delivering the project. So here you can see those OKRs are ranked, and they have a theme, and there's exit criteria. So these are the key results. The objectives aren't actually listed here, which is not ideal, but hopefully everyone knows what they are. And it will be clear to the people on the team what those key results are related to. So like I say, not ideal, but a real life example. And what you can see for these key results is it's very clear whether or not they have been met. So rank 0, quality threshold. Priority 1 issues are open for less than 1 week. Very clear if that's true or false. Level 2, test failures have a 24-hour response. Again, very clear if that's been met. And then the next highest priority is the quarterly release. We want all the priority 1 change requests fixed and reliability error rate at release criteria. And so you can go down this list and see the key results and see whether or not they've been achieved very clearly. It's a yes/no answer. A few things that I want to observe about this. Firstly, all the KRs for the entire team of 400 people fits on a single piece of paper. That's pretty cool. That allows them to print that paper off and post it all over the office so people can see what's going on. Obviously, we're all remote now, so that's something you can just go and see on a single page and see how you're doing. And everyone in the organization should be able to think about what they're doing right now and see if it relates to one of those key results. And if it doesn't, think, well, why am I doing this work? Is this the most important thing I could be doing right now? Maybe not. Maybe I should find something else to do instead. So very clear what everyone should be working on, creates alignment across the whole team. These key results are set by the engineering managers of every team working together to decide what we're going to focus on for the next month. And it's focused on the outcomes, not the individual features. That work of taking these outcomes and then working out what features or tasks to build, that's done by the teams. It's not done by the upstream leaders or analysts or product managers. The teams look at whatever the highest priority work is and work out how to break that into features. And the cool thing about that, which is super important, is when you're presented with a prioritized list of tasks, a lot of teams then focus on, did we get the tasks we were assigned done? that's not actually the most important thing. The most important thing is, did we achieve our objectives? And so when teams are focused on did we get the work done that we were assigned, if you got your work done but you didn't achieve the objective, what happens is people start fighting and saying, well, my team did what we were supposed to do. And it's entirely possible that every team did what they were supposed to do. It's just that those things didn't achieve the objective. When you give teams lists of OKRs that they have decided and it's their job to actually work out what work needs to be done, they're much more likely to collaborate and work together, because it's only by working together that they can achieve the objectives. No one gets to say that they succeeded or that they were done unless everyone is done. And that really creates a culture where people work together in pursuit of the objective, rather than a culture where it's all about, did I do the work that I was assigned this week? And, if I need to help someone else, well, that's great. But, I've got all these features I've got to build, so I can't help you right now. Well, actually, building the features isn't important. Achieving the objectives is what's important. And so focusing on the objectives is a great way to make sure that everyone is more likely to work together in pursuit of those objectives. As I said in the previous module, there's 4 different kinds of work that we are going to care about. Firstly, sets of features. Secondly, those architectural outcomes, and those can both be expressed in terms of OKRs. Then there's going to be customer requests, and finally there's going to be kind of support work and indeed unplanned work as well. You're not going to be able to specify all of those things as OKRs, and that's not actually the right thing to do. We need to use another tool in conjunction with OKRs to make this work, and that is capacity planning. And what we want to do is dedicate some proportion of our capacity to delivering OKRs. And then we're going to dedicate some proportion of our capacity to customer requests and support work. And then we're going to leave, always crucially, at least 20% of our capacity unallocated. This is super important. It's a very common fallacy for teams to allocate 100% of their capacity. And then when unplanned work comes along, what happens is it disrupts all the planned work. It's crucial for teams to have spare capacity, and that is not just for unplanned work, it's also that teams can work on improvement work and things that they're passionate about, all of which help make the organization more effective and increase the morale of your team as well, which is really crucial. Google has 20% time for people to work on things they're passionate about. 3M famously had 20% time for people to work on things they were passionate about, which is where sticky notes came from. I'll talk later on in the course about the importance of this and how we can use it effectively. But right now I'm just going to say you should always leave at least 20% of your capacity uncommitted. And then you can take the rest of the capacity and split it between delivering OKRs and then other kinds of work that doesn't fall under OKRs, but that is planned work, such as customer requests, support work, and so forth. So that's the other crucial tool that you want to use in conjunction with OKRs as part of your planning process.